Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Conscious Love Network. I'm here with Marty. Marty's going to tell us a little bit about himself today and what he's been up to in his transformations. So, with that, Marty, please introduce yourself and let us know how you share your light in the world.
Melanie, thank you very much for inviting me to do this. It's an incredible privilege to share my journey with others. How do well, in answer to your question, I try to wake every day in gratitude and just remember, you know, what I'm grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
I, in order to tell you where I am now and what I do now, I have to tell you a little bit about my past. I own a practice, a breathwork practice, and what the method that I use in my practice is called elemental rhythm. And it is a combination of somatic, holotropic, and a Wim Hof basic breathwork. And I'll talk about the whole process a little bit after I tell you how I got here. And because a lot of people think it's very interesting, and to the outsider, it seems very unconventional with my past to where I'm at now. Most of my adult life, I was a police officer. I was with a couple local township police departments, and then I went to the Michigan State Police, and I did an entire career, 25 years in the Michigan State Police, and I retired as the commander of investigations and intelligence. Simultaneous to that, I was also in the United States Air Force Reserve. I was a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and we did anti-terrorism after 9/11. I was called up a couple times to do that. The reason I bring all this up is because the lifestyles that I was in was one that was very stressful and very centered on sympathetic nervous system dominant. And in those careers, most of my career, I was a police officer in the Detroit area. So, I mean, we were as in that career, you're trained to always be on your guard, always be alert, always be in condition red. Well, now that I'm a breathwork practitioner, we call that sympathetic nervous system dominant, fight or flight, freeze or fawn. Okay. So I spent most of my careers, both of them, in that mode as a survival strategy. And when I retired from that, I retired from the state police and I started my own investigations agency. Did that for another 10 years as a private business owner. That was tremendously successful. And I was able to just shut down all that stuff a couple years ago. Reach that magic point in life where now you can relax and enjoy the fruits of your labors and such. Well, in doing that, I wanted to now down regulate this mode that I had spent my entire life in. And, psychologically, that's, neuroplasticity and default mode network and all these terms that basically mean you're stuck in that mode. And I engaged in mindfulness and meditation and fitness, plant-based diet, all these other modalities to try to downshift now. Okay. And I started to look into wellness resorts, and I ended up at one it was advertised as a wellness resort. It was in Dominican Republic, and it was really just your typical all you can eat and drink, but they had yoga, meditation, and a salad bar. You know, that wasn't quite what I was looking for. So ultimately, and most people that find this path that I'm about to talk about say it was a calling. And somehow I came across on the internet a retreat, a healing retreat in Costa Rica called Rhythmia, and it's a ayahuasca retreat to put it in general terms, but it was so much more than that. It was an entire week of various healing modalities to get you in alignment for the shamanic ceremonies of ayahuasca. And for anybody that doesn't know what ayahuasca is, it's an ancient plant medicine, goes back 5,000 years. Conventionally, it's considered a psychedelic, but it produces what it does is the active ingredients is dimethyltryptamine, and there's been tons of studies done on DMT, dimethyltryptamine, that have shown that it's got this incredible healing powers. Okay, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, is also it's also manufactured by your pineal gland in your brain. And amongst other modalities that we practiced during that week, we had yoga, sound baths, and meditation sessions, and massages, and hot and cold plunges, and lava mud baths, all these things, and leading to get you in alignment for the ayahuasca ceremonies.
Mm.
Well, one of the other modalities was breathwork. I had never heard of breathwork. This was February of 2024. I came down there as a pilgrim from Michigan, right? And I was a cop my whole life. I had even worked undercover narcotics. So me to go off and do drugs someplace, you had to get in the mindset that this was not, it's a plant medicine facility, and it's actually a licensed plant medicine facility. It's actually handled as a medical facility. So I was just so enthusiastic about healing, okay, that I took the leap and went down there. And it's a week-long process where you go through the whole thing. You do 4 plant medicine ceremonies and 2 breathwork ceremonies during that week, along with the other things during the day. And they're very well supervised, and they're put on by shamans from South America and so on. So why that's so important is because whenever these plant medicines in any form are engaged in, or you sit with them, they call you sit with it, mindset and setting are very important. And there's a lot of places you can go through the underground and end up in somebody's basement doing ayahuasca and, get high or something like that and talk about your weird experience. And if it's not done in the right mindset, the set and setting, then it's not a healing ceremony. It's more just a lot of people come out of those types of things with a really bad experience. And it just doesn't, it's not the healing experience. Breathwork is somewhat similar to that, and I had never heard of it, like I said. And, I don't really have to go into the justification for the breakthroughs that you have with an ayahuasca ceremony, because I'm sure that's pretty much implied. But I was very surprised that when I did breathwork, that I was having just as heightened breakthroughs and almost spiritual breakthroughs as I was with the ayahuasca ceremonies. And maybe some of the biggest breakthroughs I had, one was merged with my soul and my soul's intent and so on. That was in an ayahuasca ceremony, in a breathwork ceremony. And I ended up, like I said, it's a 7-day process. I ended up staying for a second week my first time down there because as you're clearing away all these past traumas and emotional blocks and all these things, I had more than my share that I had accumulated over the years. So after a week, I'm like, I still have some stuff to work on. So I stayed for a second week, and it was pretty tremendous. And that was February to March, and then I ended up going back in June. And when I was in there in June, it was a lot of clearing out of stuff, just purging things, getting rid of old false beliefs and emotional blocks and past traumas that just kind of play in a loop in your subconscious, and you don't know how to get rid of them. And you can go to years of therapy and talk therapy. I mean, there's a role for it, but it just seems like with these processes, you do like 3 years of therapy in one session like that. And now as a practitioner, that is what a lot of my clients will report. It's like, wow, I've been working on this for years, and boom, through a breathwork session, they were able to go right to the issue, clear it out. So anyway, back in June, I went down there, came back. I had a very strong download, and downloads are basically a message that comes to you very clearly and very lucidly. And there was plenty of those. There was plenty of breakthroughs and downloads, and that's for another discussion some other time, because that's a good hour and a half. I could talk about that forever and the breakthroughs that I was having. Went to my childhood and just cleared out
Mm,
all this stuff, that I didn't even know I was carrying around with me. So one of the big downloads that I had was that said, you will go back to Michigan. I live in Michigan near Detroit. You will go back to Michigan, you will open your own practice and you will share this with others.
mm,
And it was interesting because I didn't know what breathwork was because in the Midwest, it's relatively unknown unless you're in, the yoga circles and the healing circles and so on. You can't find it. And when I came back, I Googled breathwork near me, and there was one woman that was doing it once a week or once a month in my area. So when I came back, I started to research, the training, the certification, started to look because I had stood up businesses, this was back in June. And as I was sitting next to the pool down at Rhythmia after I got that down, I'm saying, well, I'm going to start my own business. I should be operational by January, getting everything together. Well, when I came back, I reached out to the one person that was doing it in this area close to my home. And she responded with, I'm not going to be doing it in that space anymore. I said, well, I'm really interested in your space, So I ended up also researching the training. And it turned out one of the people who had attended this same retreat that I was at years ago came back with the same type of download, started her own practice, got trained up. Now she's a trainer. I found her on Facebook, just to ask questions. And her response was, well, I'm going to have a class starting next week to get your certification in Southeast Ohio. So I'm like, I'm there, boom, got the training, got the facility. I could hardly get my website up fast enough when I came back to start taking
mm,
clients. So it's like serendipity, just everything just lined up. And my approach to that was to just jump into the stream of consciousness, lift your feet up, allow and let it take you where it's going to take you.
mm,
Be brave, be vulnerable, okay? Take a chance. I think it's Brene Brown says there's no progress without risk and vulnerability.
yeah.
Okay, so going down to Rhythmia to do the ayahuasca thing, that's risk and vulnerability for a lot of people. Going to some unknown place in Costa Rica. And so, yeah, I mean, it just all just came together. And then when I say I found my I connected with my soul and found my soul's purpose, I feel what I'm doing now is really consistent with my soul's purpose. And from an
Mm,
outsider, they go, wow, you were a cop and now you do this. That's so much different. I'm like, I don't really see it as much different. I'm helping other people. Okay. When I was in a leadership position, I retired as a commander of investigations and intelligence from the state police. With all the people who worked for me, I created an environment and held space for them to succeed.
mm, mm,
As a breathwork practitioner, when I do sessions, I create an environment and hold space energetically for them to heal themselves. So that's the nice switch is I did a whole career of, when somebody dials 911 and you show up, very rarely when you show up, they go, oh gosh, thank you for showing up, trooper. How are you feeling today? It's never
mm.
about you, And for an empath and probably a codependent as well, back then, it was very validating for me to fix everybody else, I thought.
Mm,
I wasn't really fixing them, but maybe I thought that's what I was doing. But in this now, I provide that environment, hold space for them to learn how to fix themselves. And when we do a session lasts about an hour and a half,
mhm,
and it involves energy releasing movement at the beginning. My method involves wearing binaural stimulating headphones and an eye mask. Okay, so you're totally immersed as an individual. You could have 30 people in a room and you feel like you're on your own magic carpet, nobody's around. And so it starts out with the energy releasing shake. Then we do 5 rounds of gradually escalating rate breaths and then some breath holds. Repeat
mhm,
that 5 times each, put to binaural stimulating music. And at the end, then we do a past self meditation. And the past self meditation involves going back to an earlier point in life. Now, at this point, you're in a really elevated state.
Mhm.
And what the breath process does is it puts your brain into what's called transient hypofrontality. That's where your prefrontal cortex goes into theta wave. Theta wave is that feeling that you have right before you fall asleep. You just feel like you're just floating. We can do that. Anybody who's practiced or tried to practice um, meditation finds it takes lots and lots of practice, and I can't shut my mind off, so on. This process of breath work, it stimulates the vagus nerve in the lower part of the body and sends all this messaging up to your brain saying, hey, guess what? Parasympathetic's coming, shut up. We're in charge now, and we're going to rest and relax. And that's what puts your prefrontal cortex into transient hypofrontality. And the reason that's important is because the prefrontal cortex is where all those negative beliefs and inhibitions and worry and, circular thoughts are all generated. And that kind of gives that a rest. So when we do the past self meditation, a lot of people end up going back to periods in their life that were traumatic. And in
Mhm.
doing so, they can now address that trauma. And it could have been something that happened when they were 9 years old. Okay. That trauma was processed and stored with the intellect and intelligence of a 9 year old. Okay. And that's where it stayed. And it's back there someplace. And when you do this process, you're now able to, in a gentle manner, by not putting the person back into that trauma. Whenever you see on the internet when they're advertising these, breath work and people are flopping around and three guards are holding them down, our method doesn't do that. We don't put them back into trauma and then say, toodaloo, have a nice day, because a lot of those people never come back.
Mhm.
I have a lot of people that will approach me and say, I did it once, I'm never going to do it again. I said, well,
Mhm.
you probably had an irresponsible facilitator. And just because everybody can breathe doesn't mean that every breath technique is going to be good for them. So you'll see a lot of like yoga studios and stuff like that. You'll talk to somebody say, oh, yeah, I already do breath work. We do it in my yoga class. Well, breathing heavy in a circular breath pattern is not a properly executed breathwork session, not necessarily. There's actually ways to do it. And if somebody's having a real tough time, and you don't just keep pushing them over the edge.
Mhm.
You gotta read it as a practitioner. And when I say hold space, you number one have to do the energy work. And I didn't realize now, and this has been a learning curve for me as well, as I come in contact with more spiritual practitioners and so on. I learned under human design that I'm a reflector. And I had learned that that's like a big deal, 1% of the population. And it made a lot of sense because it really like came into play when I was a detective and so on, because I could read a room and I could go in undercover situations in a crack house in Detroit and I'd have to like assess everybody and be able to like know what's going on. But as I started doing breath work and now I'm an open vessel, okay,
Mhm.
and this energy exchange is very powerful. I mean, there's a lot of emotional stuff coming up, and there's a lot of energy being generated, and there's a way to hold that energy, and typically we call it Reiki and so on, right? And I just started doing it instinctively and helping
Mhm.
hold the space for people, and if they're having trouble, just connect with them energetically and refocus it. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I just went by instinct. And then people would report to me. It could have been somebody who's very practiced in breath work or at a retreat for CEOs, some business retreat that I do that a lot too. I do different retreats and visiting sessions. And in both cases, you had a person having a lot of trouble with this chaotic energy flowing around, and I could feel it. And I would just put my hands on their head or their shoulders and just guide the energy back. And after the session, they would report, "Wow, that was crazy. You put your hands on my head, and all the energy just came right back, funneled right back down to my core, and that just
Mhm.
became like a rhythmic kind of session for the rest of it." So I guess that whole rabbit trail I just went down, I guess, be cautious when you do breath work, that the person actually, I mean, it's just like anything else, you don't go to any old mechanic, you ask around, do some due diligence and stuff like that. Because it is a method. It's very scientific, a method. I mean, it's been supported by tons of research, a lot of it out of Stanford University, I think University of Minnesota. Most of the research recently has been done with veterans who suffer from
Mhm.
trauma and PTSD. And conscious, they call it, in the studies, they call it conscious breathing meditation. It's breath work. And they actually state in these papers that, and on my website, I cite the papers if you want to go to the educational section, you read all this research. They actually state that this is the only thing that down regulates the sympathetic nervous system
Mhm.
is the conscious breathing meditation. Okay. And which is pretty powerful. And I I've asked people to provide reviews, on a Google review and stuff like that. But the things that at the end of the session, we do the breath work sessions, we do the meditation, past self meditation. Then there's an integration where I just leave everybody alone. There's some nice soothing music, and you're just kind of floating in this energy space that they've created, and then bring them out slowly, and then we have a share to their level of comfort. And the things that people share, just mind blowing. That they're just this ability to go back and just wipe out things they've been carrying around for most of their life.
Mhm.
And it's very gratifying, of course, and as a healer or a practitioner, I've read that you get a tremendous boost in serotonin when you help others. Okay, so it's a reciprocal benefit, of course. It's good, but yeah, I've got a practice and in-person practice here in Michigan. I also do online sessions, both group and individually. I do visiting sessions all around town, corporate retreats. Just I'll put on events at other people's practices, stuff like that. I'm in it for the healing. You know, I've gone a couple routes. I've gone the boutique, me just going around with my portable sound system, which is no big deal. Putting these on, I go into people's homes if they want, and or I did the big healing center stuff. And honestly, I kind of like the one-on-one because it's about the healing. It's not about making the money and milling people through to keep the rent paid, kind of thing like that. But yeah, it's tremendous. And all I can really say is, now whenever I do my own breath work or whenever I do meditation and I ask for guidance in something, it just seems like the message that always comes back from my spirit guides or, from the universe or a higher source, that it always seems like the message is always allow, surrender and allow. Allow the process, allow everything to come together. And that has to do with relationships and what's going to happen tomorrow or 10 years from now. Allow it to happen and get over yourself, get over your need to control outcomes. You know, since when does things turn out the way you thought they were going to 5 years ago? And I found that once I lifted my feet in this big stream of consciousness, they always turn out much better.
Hmm.
A lot of risk, I guess. It takes a lot of vulnerability, and those are the kind of things that people work on in these sessions. Show me before we start a session, we start out with an intention, and the intention could be show me how to be vulnerable, and then you just go into the session, you leave it. We always start a session out with gratitude. At the beginning, we do a grounding meditation. Say, think of a time when you were filled with gratitude. Go back. How's that feel in your body? Who's there? Be there as if it's happening right now. And then we establish an intention. What is the intention for this session? Could be like, show me how to be loved, show me how to forgive, all these things, and then just leave it. And then later on in the session, what comes to people was totally unexpected. Because the worst ones, the hardest ones to facilitate are the ones who come and go, oh yeah, I do breath work all the time, no problem. They come in with a preconceived notion of how the session's supposed to go, and they don't allow, and they try to control the outcome with them, and they just basically take themselves offline from the process. Because this is kind of a unique process that I do, as opposed to one that they're used to. So and I can tell, if they start going off the rails and doing their own thing, and then it's always, okay, well, hey, that's their journey. I'm just holding space, that's your journey. And at the end, those are usually the ones that will say, yeah, I really didn't get that elevated thing. So because you didn't, you went and tried to control the outcome. It's only happened a couple times. I've had about 200 people in the last 9 months that I've helped, which is pretty good. But
Yeah,
for the most
that's
part, they're
great.
just tremendous experiences that people have. So yeah.
So if you had a time machine and you're able to go back to your younger self and when you were into that zone of hyper stimulation, hyper beta waves in your brain, and not even knowing and not even being aware of that, what would you say to that person? Because there's so many people watching that are in that state.
Well, yeah, that topic comes up a lot. I mean, I just had a session on Sunday of 9 people, and there was a mother-daughter team in there, and the daughter was, I think she's about 19 years old. I said, man, I wish I would have had this when I was 19, but this kind of stuff wasn't mainstream.
Right.
It's so available now. All this, all these healing modalities they're becoming more and more mainstream. What I would tell myself is, well, number one, had I known it was going to go by this quickly, I would have enjoyed myself much more, you know? Yeah, don't take yourself so seriously.
Mm,
Practice mindfulness, being in the moment. Don't get all hung up on the outcomes. Have a plan, of course, Don't walk around, like, what was that in the time machine? Where were they? The Eloys who just laid around eating flowers, and everything was taken care of. But no, definitely be in the moment, appreciate it, do your best, find your passion, whatever your
mm,
passion is, and be the best at it. I have 3 boys, and I've told them the same things, and they're all one's a writer, the other one's a musician, and the other one's a football player, and they all just pursued their passion. And don't let people tell you that you won't succeed. The world's full of people that can tell you how to fail at something. Don't listen to them. If you're going to do something, pour your heart and soul into it and be the best at it. Okay? And then everything will take care of itself later. Number one. Number two, you're probably going to be doing something that doesn't exist today.
right.
You know, just the way technology moves and so on. So be prepared, be diverse, and absolutely just a foundation of gratitude. Be grateful for what you have and the people around you. Success comes from relationships, not from possessions. You know, and it's so important to be in a state of gratitude because we're surrounded right now by elements that will tell you how horrible the world is.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, my personal opinion is, I lived in an advertising um, family for a while, and that's meant to drive engagement. If you can be scared to the bejesus, you'll be dialing into the TV or clicking on the internet. So that's all that fear. That's that fear mongering and marketing fears. My personal opinion, and And I've heard experts that work in IT say that that really the intent is to drive engagement. So that having been said, learn gratitude. Come from a state of gratitude. Don't get all wrapped up in how you're supposed to think by the media and the stuff floating around.
Mhm.
Your life it's going to be as good or as bad as you make it.
Yeah.
And that's what I would tell my 16-year-old self.
That's
Whether the
beautiful.
16-year-old would listen or not, that's a different story. Probably not.
Well, it's heard and received either way, right? That's beautiful. One question I always ask everyone is how do you choose one conscious love every day? What does that mean to you?
Well, like I said, I try to practice gratitude. As soon as I open my eyes in the morning, I do my breath rounds, just my conscious breathing, and called triangular breath, naturally in, naturally out. Let the natural pause come before your body needs to inhale again. That's where people walk around in a constant state of anxiety because they've taught themselves to breathe in a circular manner. And masks did a lot to train people because you're subconsciously thinking you're oxygen deprived, so people will get into this circular breathing pattern, and that drops down the CO2 levels in your blood. And you need that for the oxygen CO2 exchange. So I start out every day with 5 minutes of just triangular breaths, allowing that pause between the exhale and the inhale, and then think of what I'm grateful for, and then I start my day, starting out in a state of gratitude.
That's beautiful for sure. Yeah, it's such a good reminder for everyone watching.
Mhm.
Anything else you wanted to share with everyone?
Well, yeah, I've got my website is justbreathe1234.com. And the name of my company is Metamorphosis Breathwork. And if you were to go, anybody were to go on the website, they can book individual sessions if they're local here. Just reach out to me. We can book online sessions. I do it over Zoom, and it's just as effective. You don't have that strong, in the same room energy exchange, but I haven't had many people complain that they didn't feel like they got a lot out of online sessions. And some of the biggest aha breakthroughs for some people have been on online sessions, and just empowerment that they feel that when they're able to downregulate that central nervous system that they've been told their whole life, you suffer from a dysfunctional central nervous system, so you're going to have to take these pills the rest of your life. And they're able to find that they can do all that themselves. It's tremendous. So that's
Very
that.
powerful indeed. And we'll definitely put your links in the comments below so everyone can find it really easily. Well, Marty, it was such a pleasure to have you. Any last thoughts or anything else?
Well, thank you very much, and I hope to do much more with you. I know we discussed
Yeah,
that you want to put on some online events and so on, and anybody watching this can definitely count on seeing me again in some capacity if I have the opportunity.
wonderful. Yes, absolutely. We'll definitely get on that. And it's so wonderful to have you and to connect and get to know you better. And I'm really happy that everyone got a chance to get to know you more today as well. Thank you so much, Marty. Thanks for joining me. Thank
Thank
you, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you all very soon. Thanks.